Right, so our steel industry is once more taking a clobbering as TATA Steel are set to make 2,800 people in Port Talbot in South Wales redundant. But what has made this story all the more angering this time around is that for years and years, TATA have threatened the government with closure of the Port Talbot plant, the lifeblood of Port Talbot for years, unless they've coughed up enough subsidies to keep the company going, and the Tories have duly obliged on repeated occasions over the last 14 years of their abhorrent reign in doing that. But with Labour having allowed the Indian conglomerate to buy the plant in 2007. Both are to blame therefore, but then New Labour were a bunch of Tories too, as is its reincarnation under Keir Starmer now. Starmer, of course, last year, you might remember, made a big thing about steel being made for warships by British Steel. And by that you might be thinking that we still have some semblance of a steel industry of our own. But actually British Steel, based in Scunthorpe, makes steel plate, do not make steel section at all for shipbuilding, and are actually owned by the Chinese. Our entire steel industry, which so many of our other industries rely on, our national defence relies on, is beholden to foreign corporations to make our steel for us. And as TATA are showing, that gives them a hell of a lot of leverage. The threat of packing up and leaving works to get more money out of the government to keep it going. It is a matter of national interest and national security that we renationalise our steel industry. We're a global laughingstock over this. And what makes the world laugh even harder is that be it Sunak or Starmer, they'll sell the industry again to another foreign body if they have to, if given the chance, because renationalisation is completely alien to the pair of them. Right, so let's start with a bit of context for our steel industry here, how we got into this mess, because it leads us into the situation our steel industry now finds itself in. Now, British Steel was one of many public assets, as so many of you will know, not nailed down, that the Tory government and Margaret Thatcher flogged off. And in the case of British Steel, this happened in 1988, by which point the industry, under government control, had doubled production since Thatcher came to power in 1979, was turning a profit, which, being a nationalised service, was cash to be sunk back into delivering an even better service in the national interest, and was costing us all less to produce. Naturally, the Tories felt shareholders should get that money instead of us benefiting from it, and therefore sold it, but all very sneakily, because what they did with British Steel, actually very similar to what they did with our water companies, and that was to basically change the British Steel Corporation, the nationalised industry, into British Steel plc, a private company, and all assets, goods and chattels were then therefore transferred to this, and then along came the investors. The trouble with private companies is that they can be bought and sold though, and taken over, and come 1999, British Steel plc ceased to exist, as it merged with a Dutch company, which I cannot pronounce and I'm not going to attempt to do. But once the merger went through, it all became the much more easy to pronounce Chorus Group. So now our steel industry was owned by Denmark in effect. Chorus then itself, however, got taken over in its entirety in 2007 by the Indian steel conglomerate TATA Steel, who have been in and out of the news a lot in recent years, chiefly for threatening to abandon its British sites unless the government stump up public cash to help them out. In 2016, TATA sold off its Scunthorpe site to investment company Greybull Capital, a British company. Therefore, we had a British private steel manufacturing base again, since Greybull are a British company, and this became called British Steel again. But then history, of course, repeats itself. Private company can be bought and sold. And this site was acquired by the Chinese Jingye Group in 2020, yet is still calling itself British Steel. So our steel industry is Indian and Chinese, neither of whom directly bought these sites from the British government. This is a situation that has been allowed to happen because of privatisation, because key infrastructure such as steel was just a cash cow to Thatcherites and capitalism. So now TATA are once again threatening jobs. The job cuts are coming in the worst way possible though, because it is actually the greening of the site that TATA are using to excuse the job cuts. At the end of this year, the 2 blast furnaces at Port Talbot will close, to be replaced by much less polluting electric arc furnaces costing an estimated £1.2 billion. They produce a lot less CO2, but they also require fewer workers to operate them. Big investment by TATA, you would think? Nope. They already threatened to close the entire plant unless we stump up half the cost to the public purse. So the Tories squealed like the little piggies that they are, and despite claiming to have no money for anything other than war these days, if you listen to them, TATA are actually getting £500 million towards the cost of this replacement. Not so long ago, TATA were threatening 5,000 job losses. So the government again stepped in with a funding package to safeguard these jobs. Will they end up having to stump up yet more cash yet again to save these 2,800 jobs? TATA have built a reputation of threatening jobs in this country to get money out of the government, when frankly the answer is quite simple. If they want to walk, let them. It'll be a damn sight cheaper at this point. Take the site back into public ownership, because when nationalised, it made a profit. TATA claimed it's a loss-making venture. Well, clearly they're just not very good at running it then. If they can't make it work, let someone else have a go. But when their boss trousered £1.6 million last year, a pay rise of a cool £700,000, I'm calling bullshit on them not making any money. Here's the thing though. The redundancies are unnecessary because trade unions got their heads together a while back and came up with a decarbonisation plan for the UK steel industry that would not require redundancies, and the likes of the GMB and Sharon Graham's Unite are asking, well, why are you not following our idea? To which I'd answer, look at the sheer amount of cash the government have thrown at TATA every time they threaten redundancies in order to keep the lie of privatisation going, and ask yourself, actually, in this situation here, who's really in charge? Because if our government had any spine, they would just renationalise at this point. They'd not let themselves be cucked like they clearly must be. They'd take control and they'd follow that plan while still greening the industry. But they've no spine. And besides, when it comes to any government of Rishi Sunak, you always have to ask the question, is he benefiting financially himself here? Because it so often seems to be the case, doesn't it? TATA are an Indian company. Is Infosys involved here somewhere along the lines again? There are 32,000 people living in Port Talbot. 4,000 of them work at the steelworks. That's a full eighth of the population of Port Talbot. It is the biggest employer in the area by far. These redundancies, cutting the workforce by almost 3/4, will be catastrophic for the local economy there. It makes going green look bad, when that shouldn't be the crux of any argument against these plans. The fact is, TATA have repeatedly looked to downsize the staff required at this site. They can now do it. We, the general public, via these idiots we elect, abusing the public purse, because we need steel. By not renationalising, this is the leverage TATA knows it has. We need steel for building, railways, car manufacture, defence. Heck, from a national security position, it's a catastrophic prospect to not have steel. And we will be the only G20 country not actually able to produce its own steel, since these new arc furnaces will produce steel by recycling old steel. They won't actually be producing new steel from scratch at all. We will not be able to do that in this country whatsoever. All part of the downsizing and all part of the short-sightedness of the fools running the country. There's an obvious need for us to produce the high-quality British steel necessary for our infrastructure and other industries. Steel is a basic in this day and age in any productive, advanced nation. These job losses would not be necessary if they renationalised and invested in new steel manufacturing, which would save many of these jobs, which would pay for itself given how reliant on steel so many other industries are. But investing in this country just isn't something those obsessed with shrinking the state instead will do. Meanwhile, up in Scunthorpe, there are material concerns about its ability to continue, according to auditors, so British Steel in name once more might be about to bite the dust again too. Some are blaming Brexit for this. The former First Minister of Wales, Carwyn Jones, has said, in 2016 there was certainly a change in terms of the UK government's activity around TATA. Pre the Brexit referendum they were very active. Sajid Javid and I went to Mumbai. We talked to TATA. After the referendum, zero interest in the steel industry, and that, I'm afraid, has remained the case since. I think there's a lot of fallout from Brexit that we still don't realise or isn't necessarily being felt still in some of our everyday lives, certainly not affecting those of us not directly connected to the steel industry. But the knock-on effects could be felt eventually. Meanwhile, here's a tweet from Nigel Farage, because there's always one, isn't there? This one comes from 2016 when he said, if we vote to remain on June 23rd, it is the end of the steel industry in this country. Simple as that. We must leave the EU. Farage, as ever, with his finger on the pulse. I'm not sure I necessarily blame Brexit in and of itself here as much as I blame the government directly, though, because privatisation has been a pain for far longer than the effects of Brexit have been felt. Renationalisation of steel is the only way it is going to be saved. Neither the Tories nor Labour will do it. TATA, frankly, therefore, has got it made. If Starmer wasn't so reliant on other people telling him what to do, he could tell TATA, as the likely next PM, that they have a rethink or he's renationalising them. He's got a lot of leverage if he chose to deploy it. Instead, he will, no doubt, bend over backwards for them as well. Where steel conglomerates are rubbing their hands together with glee, so are private health investors, also in safe hands with Sunak and Starmer alike. But this is all a lot more sneaky, as they're doing away with doctors whilst making you think you'll still be seeing one, as this video here will explain all about. Another cost of privatisation. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.